very, very pleased to have you, and thank you all for coming. This is our fourth Lunch and Learn this fall, and we have one more after that. We're happy to have each of you here to learn about an anniversary of a very important battle here in the state's history, and that is the Battle of Franklin. And we have one of our very best experts in this field, Richard White, who will come along here in a few minutes to give us a really neat presentation about some of the little-known facts about this battle. Before we do that, let me point your attention to the membership card that each one of you has in your seat. We'd like to take this opportunity to encourage you to join us as a member of the Tennessee State Museum. Member benefits have lots of things we do. We do exhibit openings, and you get invitations for that, as well as an award-winning newsletter that we produce, as well as many things like bus trips and public programs that we do. So please, with the new museum, I'm sure each one of you have heard that's coming in the near future. We'd love to have your support and have you join us on this new museum adventure that we're working through right now. Before, with having said that, I will go ahead and get us started. And we'd like to welcome Richard White. Richard is our newest curator to our team, but he is an expert in Civil War history, particularly here in Tennessee and the Army of Tennessee. And he's going to take us through what he believes are 5 important things to learn about the Battle of Franklin. Let's welcome him.
Well, hey, good morning, good afternoon now, everybody. And like Jeff said, welcome to the museum here. I just decided to do a little talk about the Battle of Franklin for you guys today here. We will have to pack in a lot of information here in 30 minutes, so we might move kind of fast. But I started thinking about this as 5 things that people should know about the battle. And then I thought, well, you're going to hit those 5 things that everybody always talks about this battle. So I picked out 5 different things that usually don't make it into documentaries and talks and stuff, but it'll still be a narrative. So as we go through these 5 events, I'll walk you through this Battle of Franklin, and hopefully by the time we're done, we get done with this battle here. In terms of military history, it's a really great, cool battle. I know that's weird to say about a war and battle, but it usually gets lumped into the whole campaign. Hood's campaign to retake Nashville, come up into Middle Tennessee. But I started out here with the slide. Just got the Battle of Franklin. It's going to happen on November 30th, 1864. So another reason for us doing this talk is we're coming up on the 152nd anniversary of the battle here at the end of November. The image you've got up here is just called the Battle of Franklin. It's a Kurtz and Allison lithograph. It's post-war. It's a very sort of romantic view of the battle. Not a lot in there is going to be too factually accurate, but a pretty good image to start you guys out with. But what we have here is the city of Atlanta falls to Sherman's forces. Sherman starts marching to the sea in his famous March to the Sea. Well, Hood's Army of Tennessee backtracks, and they head back up into Tennessee. And what Hood is thinking is maybe he can race back here behind Sherman, come up and take Nashville. And of course, in 1864, that would be a very big accomplishment for the Confederacy and would sort of change the fortunes of the war here in the East especially. But you're basically going to end up having a race. Hood is racing north. There's another portion of the Union Army, the 23rd Corps, that is racing in front of him. And at Spring Hill, this is one of those things that always gets talked about. At Spring Hill, Hood sets a trap. He actually gets in front of Schofield, camps his army there along the road. But during the night, nobody does anything. The Union Army just passes right between the Confederates. And some of these Union troops are saying they can see campfires and guys cooking food around the fires and stuff. So Hood wakes up in the morning, he's pretty mad at his subordinate commanders, and they take to the road and head towards Franklin. Well, the problem when Schofield, the Union Army, reaches Franklin, his pontoon bridges have not arrived for crossing the Harpeth River. And the county bridge there, right behind the city of Franklin, has been washed out. So the Union troops are kind of trapped there. But our first slide here is an image that's actually in the museum's collection. If you know much about Franklin, the Battle of Franklin, there's not a lot of good photographs. You just didn't have as many photographers out here in the Western theater that were following these armies around and taking photographs like you did in the East. So this is an image that originally appeared in Battles and Leaders of the Civil War. But what you're seeing here is basically the view of the Confederate Army at the city of Franklin once they arrive. There's two big hills south of Franklin called Winstead Hill and Breezy Hill. The Confederate Army comes over those hills, and you're basically going to see, they're going to see this view in front of them. But you got the city of Franklin back here in the background. The Columbia Pike is running right here in front of these farm buildings, and most of the Confederate attack will take place on either side of that turnpike right there. If you're familiar with the area, the Carter House is going to be really closely located in this church steeple you see here, and over off to the right is Fort Granger up on one of these hills. So this is pretty much the view that you're going to see. Open fields. It's almost 2 miles from the hill to the Union line. So this is a pretty daunting charge when those Confederates arrive there. But now we're going to switch, and I'll give you guys a bird's eye view from this photo right here to here. You're getting a map of the Franklin battlefield. This is only about half of the Confederate troops that will be deployed. So the other ones are here on the other side of the Columbia Pike. But here you can see the city of Franklin up here above you. And my first major point about this battle is, like most battles in the Civil War and any other war, landscape is going to determine a lot of the battle, especially the outcome. We already talked about your Harpeth River back here is flooded. So the Union troops cannot cross over that river, so they're stuck until they can either build a bridge or those pontoon boats will arrive there. So what they do is they're going to entrench on a line that has its flanks on the river. So it's going to be completely contained in that bend in the Harpeth River there. So you've got these entrenchments that they're going to build out here, and they're very formidable. What you've got is 2 guys on each side, and they're going to dig a ditch. The guy on the back side is going to dig a shallower ditch, but they're going to throw the dirt up in this pile between them. So the front ditch is going to be a lot deeper. So it's almost like a moat, if you think of a castle or something like that. Once they finish this, you're going to have about an 8-foot berm if you're on the outside. So you've got to look up if you're attacking. It's going to be hard to climb over. The finishing touch there, they're going to cut down a bunch of trees and lay those logs on top of these entrenchments. They're called headlogs. Then you just dig out some of that dirt under the log. You've got a perfect little spot to put your rifle out and shoot. It's going to be really good protection because your head's protected by the log. So those Confederates attacking are going to have to hit a very small target up there. Another interesting couple things about the landscape here in Franklin. On the left of the Columbia Turnpike over in this area, there's a large locust grove that is right in front of the Union line. So that's going to be another impediment to formations trying to get up there to those entrenchments. But then on the right side of the Columbia Pike, you're going to have a landscape feature that's even worse than those locust groves. There is a grove of Osage Orange over here on this side of the pike. If you're familiar with that tree or bush, it's got these huge thorns on it. So what the Union troops do is they cut down those trees at about head level. You've still got the bottom thorny part there. They're going to take the back part and lay them right in front of their entrenchments. So what you're seeing here at Franklin is getting on that stuff of World War II, trench warfare. They're starting to figure out how to hold these positions. Well, the Confederate Army is going to arrive here, and they will align down here right next to the hills, and eventually basically just attack straight towards those Union positions. Another thing about the landscape, the river bend here is going to cause a problem for them. The troops down here will start out in this line, but as they move forward, they will have to bunch more and more to the right because that river's right there next to them. So eventually when this attack sort of gets to full bore, most of these Confederate troops are going to be attacking right in this area right in here. And that's where the Carter House is, if you're familiar with that area down there. And we can possibly come back to this map if you guys need some reference on stuff as we go along here. But what you're going to have, the Confederate Army of Tennessee minus 1 corps of infantry, which is still coming up the road, is going to deploy to attack these Union positions. Once they step off, the initial attack is going to be 18,000 soldiers. It's one of the largest charges of the Civil War. We always talk about the Battle of Gettysburg and Pickett's charge up there in Pennsylvania. Pickett's charge is about 13,000 men at the best estimate. So this is almost 5,000 more guys. It's going to be 2/3 of the Confederate Army. Well, as soon as the Confederate attack steps off, we get to a problem that the Federals are going to have with their command. Now, these 2 guys will come right back to them, but what you got here is as the Union forces are coming up the Columbia Pike, the last division there is ordered to deploy in front of the Union lines. They're basically there for observation. So the way too far there. The commander is this guy here, George Wagner. He is not a career Army officer and a politician before the war, or go back into politics after, so he's one of these political generals. But as they're marching up the pike there, Wagner is going to order his regiments off on the side of the road there. The 2nd Brigade that'll show up in his division is Emerson Opdyke's. And Emerson Opdyke's is one of these guys in the Civil War that I just absolutely love. He's one of these guys that learns on the job, and he's very good at what he does. By the end of the war, he's risen all the way up to brigadier general, but he enlisted as a lieutenant. So he's a guy that's a good field commander, battlefield commander. Well, he's got the 2nd Brigade in this line. Wagner there tells him to deploy on the side of the pike. Opdyke just flatly refuses to obey orders. He says, I'm not stopping here. And what this division had been doing was a rear guard action. So the whole way, they're back there sort of fighting off Hood's troops so they can't catch up with them as fast. Opdyke says, we've been doing this all morning. My men are tired and they need food, and we're not stopping here 800 yards in front of the main entrenched line. Well, Wagner gets on his horse, follows Opdyke, who just proceeds to march right past him, headed on into Franklin. And they're arguing about disobeying orders. And then Wagner tells him what's one of my favorite quotes that has to deal with this battle here. Finally, in sort of exasperation, Wagner looks at him and says, well, Opdyke, fight when and where you damn well please. We all know that you'll fight. So Opdyke goes back behind the Carter house. He's going to put his men into bivouac. They stack arms and they start cooking food. And we'll come back to him in just a second here. But when the Confederate attack starts, this line that he has established right here is going to be an impediment to the Union defenders. Wagner will not let them retreat. He tells them they have to stay out there and fight, even though they've been ordered to retreat in front of the Confederate Army. So these guys end up staying here. You have what basically almost amounts to a mutiny because they want to be out of there. You are in the 3rd summer of the war. They know how this goes. They see that whole army coming straight at them. And they think they're going to bulldoze right over us. And that's exactly what happens. The Confederates bulldoze over that line, but the Union troops on the main line up here can't fire because their guys are between the Confederates and them. So the Confederates have an advantage here. The guys going straight up that turnpike there can get almost to those Union entrenchments before the Union troops in there can do anything about it. So you got these two guys. One of the reasons why Wagner's being so obstinate, there's pretty good evidence that he was pretty highly intoxicated on this day. He had been drinking most of the morning. There's several different sources from different people that mention that. So this might be one of those times where we talk about a drunk general where it's actually true. But Wagner, this will ruin his career. He has to be relieved after the Battle of Franklin. It's granted, and he's never given a major command again as they go along here. So our next point here is a Confederate command collapse. The Confederates are coming up that turnpike. They roll over Wagner's men. But as they chase those Union soldiers back into the entrenchments, as soon as those guys are up over that burn, all the men behind that entrenchment level their muskets and fire a volley into these oncoming rebels. One of the other things that everybody always talks about Franklin, you got 6 Confederate generals that are going to die in this battle. Well, it's estimated that in this first fuselage, 3 of them go down. One of those being Patrick Cleburne, who's one of the famous guys in this battle here. But here's another guy that's one of those generals that's going to be killed here that doesn't usually get talked about too much. His name is Otho Strong. He's going to be on the left side of the Columbia Pike over there. And Cleburne, some of his men had sort of an advantage because where the pike goes through the Union entrenchments, there's nothing really blocking it there. So a lot of those Confederates will rush up there, spill through that breach, and make it into the area around the Carter house, sort of breaking the Union line right there in the middle. Well, Strahl here is on the left side. He comes up to those entrenchments, and his men can't quite make it over. The volume of fire coming from the other side is pretty stupendous. So Strahl stands there in the trench and loads muskets for his guys and passes them up. And one by one, these guys will creep up there on that fire over the top. Well, they've been there maybe about 5 or 10 minutes, and Strahl takes a wound. He's shot in the leg, I believe it was. But his men drag him out of those trenches, get him a little bit farther behind the line. They put him on a makeshift stretcher. They're about to carry him to the rear, and the Union forces unleash another volley. Well, it kills all the guys that are carrying him and wounds him again. So another group of soldiers get out there, pick him up, start dragging him to the rear. The same thing happens again. They unleash another volley. This time, one of those bullets is going to hit Straw right in the head. Kills him instantly. But supposedly his last words were "keep firing" to his men there. This is another interesting artifact we have here in our museum collection. This is Otho Strong's frock coat. It's officer's frock coat. Not the one that he was wearing at the battle. When his stuff is shipped back to his home in Dyersburg, this uniform was in the trunk. So it's much more of a very dress uniform. Probably is the one that he's wearing in this photograph here. It's hard to tell exactly, but it looks very similar. So this would have been more for like parade duty or taking photographs, stuff like that, when you want to look your best. But this uniform has been recently conserved by the museum here, and when our new museum opens in a couple of years, that will be on display, so you guys can come and actually visit that uniform. But what you have here, these 6 Confederate generals that died, it causes a problem in the Confederate command because it's a big vacuum of leadership. And it's going to be part of the reason why this battle extends so far into the night, because command is turned over to junior officers, but then those officers are wounded and killed. By the time it gets about dark, you've got regiments and brigades that are in command of lieutenants, some in command of sergeants. So the officer attrition here in the Confederate command is terrible. Of course, one of the big things in the Civil War is you lead from the front. So all these guys are out there in front of their men, perfect target. But on to our next point here, the Confederates have broken that line around the Carter house, and our old buddy Emerson Opdyke, who disobeyed his orders, he's sitting there behind the line, they're cooking food. Well, he sees this commotion, and he sees these Confederate troops charging into the Carter house lawn. Without any orders, he immediately gets his brigade online, and he said even he didn't have to tell a lot of the troops what to do. Those guys start lining up on their own. So what he's going to do is execute a furious countercharge right there across the Carter property. And this is a piece of art that's done by Don Troiani. We have it on display over here in our exhibits, but I think it's a very highly accurate depiction of what that would have looked like in the yard. It's some of the most sustained and intense hand-to-hand combat that you have in the Western theater. Clubbed muskets, bayonets, knives, all that sort of stuff. Several of Opdyke's troops said that Opdyke himself fired his revolver to empty, turned it over, and started using it as a club there in the yard of the Carter house. And of course, the Carter house you got right back here in the back. And if you're familiar with the property there, this is the farm office. This is that building that has all the bullet holes on the back side of it there. Another interesting story from here is, I believe he was a lieutenant at the time. There's a young lieutenant named Arthur MacArthur. He's going to bring his company into that yard, go through hand-to-hand fighting. By the time that's over, he's been wounded 3 times. Most people think it's mortal. He is transferred in a wagon back to Nashville. Very slowly, he starts to recover from those wounds. I mention him because he's going to go on to father Douglas MacArthur, who would be famous in World War II as a general there. So Opdyke is managed with this furious charge to seal that breach in the Confederate lines. Well, while they're pushing the Confederates back on the other side of the entrenchments, the Union soldiers start digging a new entrenchment right on the back side of this office building. It's going to be a new line that closes up, gets them further back. Well, the Confederates are pushed on the other side of that entrenchment there, and it sort of becomes their entrenchment. They'll be on the other side firing at the Union, who's firing from their new entrenched line right here on the Carter property. Now, our next thing that's interesting about the Battle of Franklin, that doesn't get too much play, is the advantage of arms. During this battle, during this war, most everybody's armed with a single-shot muzzle loader. The Army thinks that you can fire 3 shots in a minute with that thing if you're well trained. That's really not very realistic. If you're standing out in the middle of the field by yourself, you can probably do that, but nobody's shooting at you. But in the heat of the battle, it's going to be a lot different story. Well, check out this gun here. I'm going to go back to my map and we'll come back real quick. Right in this area, on the right of the turnpike, there's 2 regiments. They're the 265s. It's the 65th Illinois and the 65th Indiana. The troops in this regiment have taken it upon themselves to purchase a new weapon. The government actually ordered about 2,000 of these, so they didn't see much in government-issued hands. But there were regiments, especially here in the Western Theater, that took it upon themselves to purchase this rifle on their own. If you're at all familiar with firearms, it is the predecessor to the Winchester of Cowboy and John Wayne fame. But this is called the Henry rifle. It is a 16-shot, 44 caliber lever action rifle. A good man who could load this thing quickly could fire this rifle 45 times in a minute. So you're talking in the best of conditions, you can fire 3 from a musket. This is 45. But these two 65s, the 65th Indiana and Illinois, are going to be right there as the Confederates come up close to the river. And the sources here say that the amount of fire that was poured out of the line by those two regiments was almost incomprehensible. It just decimated the Confederate attack on that right side of the pike. One of the other generals that's killed there, General John Adams, is killed probably from a fusillade from these Henry rifles. And I didn't put him up here, but if you're curious, you can go right around the corner here. We have General Adams' uniform in our Civil War displays over there. So only a few times in the Civil War do you have these instances where you do have an advantage in weaponry. I mean, most of these guys are using the same thing. But like I said, 16 shots, so a lot of firepower coming out of that section of the line there. The Confederate formations on that end of the line sort of broke to the right and left simply because of that volume of fire trying to go around those regiments. But then finally, and it's not one of my major points, but of course, the Carter House and the Carter Cotton Gin are two of the big focal points of the battle there at Franklin. When the Confederates are smashed on the right side of that pike by those Henry rifles, the battle is really going to degenerate into sort of a slugfest. The Confederates attacked around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a fall day. It's only about an hour to sunset. So another thing that's kind of interesting about this battle, you get a lot of night fighting here at Franklin. The sun sets. Like I talked about with those officers, the attrition of the Confederate officers, there's nobody really there to tell these guys to pull back or retreat. And they just keep sitting there blazing away at each other. But the Carter House will be the center pretty much of the Union lines and the focal point there. I put this photo, I love this photo. It's a post-war photo about 1886, but this is one of the family members standing there. And one of the most intense firefights you're going to have at the Battle of Franklin will take place across the Carter Garden. And you can see the corner of the garden right there. It's at the corner of the office. But the Union troops have retrenched on the back side of that. The garden extends all the way to the entrenchments, so the Confederates are on the other side. So after dark there, these guys are just blazing away across the garden. And several times the Union soldiers try to counterattack and retake the entrenchments. The Confederates do the same, and they're fighting over about a 2-acre flat piece of ground there that was the kitchen garden for the Carter House. But this is the office building. If you go visit down there, the back side of this is covered with bullet holes from this intense firefight that they had there. Now, right across the road from the Carter House is the Carter Cotton Gin. And on most Civil War battlefields, you have some sort of landmark. It's a point of direction for guys, keep them going the right way. Well, the Carter Cotton Gin becomes the focal point of this battle and that big landmark that everybody can see. Fountain Branch Carter on his farm here in the 1860 census, he had, I think it was 28 slaves. But he's operating about 200 or 300 acres of land and then operating the cotton gin that's right there across the pike. But Pat Claiborne, when they're attacking, he's going to attack right in the direction of this cotton gin. He was most likely killed just right over in this area, off the photograph there. So right there in front of the gin. Now, if you're familiar with that Franklin area, they have purchased a lot of land down there. They're trying to create a battlefield park. But one of the things that is in the works is they're going to recreate the cotton gin on the area that it was to be able to interpret the economy in the South as well as the battlefield. Well, the battle's going to degenerate to about nothing, a few pops here and there around 9 o'clock at night, and some of those Confederate troops finally do pull back. Now what happens is they're going to wake up in the morning and the Union Army is gone. Throughout the night, the Union Army has finished their bridge and Schofield's going to get his troops back on the road towards Nashville. So they wake up to a scene which is almost indescribable. And several Confederate veterans talked about how they had been through the whole war. You know, this is getting close to the end. But they never saw anything like they had seen at the Battle of Franklin. with the amount of dead, the personal sort of nature of the combat hand to hand. And Sam Watkins, that famous Tennessean who wrote the memoir, he said that at the Battle of Franklin, the angel of death was there to gather its final harvest. He said it felt like that. Major General Cheatham, who's in command of those troops that went right up the middle of the road, said that he had never seen a scene like that, and he never wished to see one again. So Franklin is basically an interlude between the fall of Atlanta and the Battle of Nashville. So Hood's army will follow those Union troops back up here to Nashville in what is basically a foolhardy attempt to retake the city. In about 5 hours of fighting at Franklin, those 18,000 men that charged have taken almost 8,000 casualties. There's around 2,500 that are dead on the field there. The rest are wounded. The Union casualties are negligible. It's barely 1,000 because they're behind those strong entrenchments there. But what happened at Franklin is you basically have the death of the Army of Tennessee. They're sort of bled to death on those fields south of the Carter House there. They do come up here to Nashville. They're going to attempt to lay siege to our city here and take it. And of course, you have the Battle of Nashville, which takes place in December of '64, which totally routs the Confederate Army of Tennessee. It's called the decisive Battle of Nashville because it is one of the most decisive battles in the war. Here in Nashville, you had Confederate troops that basically threw down their weapons and ran off the battlefield. It's the only time the Confederate Army was fully routed from the field. But the remnants of that are going to head back down into Alabama, and they will never fight again as the Army of Tennessee. Some of those troops will sort of trickle over to North Carolina and finish up over there in the last few months of the war with some of the battles that took place there. But I guess now I'll open it up if you guys have any questions about any of this. Like I said, I tried to kind of get a few things that maybe were not in those most common narratives you hear about the Battle of Franklin, but it still sort of walks you through the battle there. But does anybody have any questions?
What about the burial of those troops that died, both Confederate and Union?
The Union troops were generally hastily interred and then removed to a national cemetery. The Carnton plantation down there in Franklin, the owner of it started burying the Confederate dead on his property. So if you go down to Carnton now, there's a Confederate cemetery there that has, I think, close to 4,000 guys. It's ones that were buried after the battle, too, from the battle. Yes, he just asked about all the burial of the dead down there at Franklin. Most of the Confederates who died in the Battle of Franklin are going to be buried there on Carter Plantation, and a lot of the Union troops were removed to national cemeteries.
A lot of people tend to forget that Tennessee fielded about 52,000 Union troops during the war, which is about about 30% of total forces in Tennessee. Fifth Tennessee Infantry Regiment, U.S. Army, they were at the capital at one point in time, supporting Illinois. Then they were at 2nd Chattanooga, reforming the Union line, defending the route. They were also at the 2nd Tennessee Mounted Infantry was at Larkinville, when he decimated Larkinville. But if I recall, it was the Tennessee Union unit in Bloody Gulch.
I think there were at least one, maybe two regiments now in Franklin. Anybody else? And yeah, he just mentioned that we were a divided state during this war. You had about 50,000 men that went north and joined the Union Army. For the Confederate troops coming back to Franklin, there was, I think, 33 regiments in the Confederate Army that were Tennessee regiments. And a lot of those guys hadn't been in the state of Tennessee in almost 2 years by the time they come back for the Battle of Franklin. So you do have a lot. There is some of that bitter brother against brother and neighbor against neighbor stuff here in Tennessee for sure. Yes.
Was the road between Carter House and the gym the Columbia Pike?
Yes. It was the main road, and he asked the road between the Carter House and the Cotton Gym. That's the Columbia Pike. That was the main artery for the Confederate advance. The first two division or corps are set up on each side of the road there. They advance on that way. Yes, sir.
Just to orient myself, in the photo you have of the combat in the Carter property,
Mm-hmm.
you point out the office building, but in that painting, it's depicted as a brick structure. That's in fact wooden. Is that just a...
It's probably just an artist's mistake.
That's actually the smokehouse.
Is that the smoke? The smokehouse is
The brick
right?
house is
The
smoke.
office is wood plank.
Right.
So I just said that wrong. This is the smokehouse. The office will be right on the other side of this.
General Hood in a good mental state of mind, or was he on pain medication?
Well, that's another thing that always gets talked about in this battle. I'd sort of skip over that. John Bell Hood's going to be the Confederate commander there, and he was asking, is he in the right mental frame of mind there at the battle? He had been twice wounded in the war. He had a useless arm. It had been shattered by a shell and hung in a sling. But at the Battle of Chickamauga, a cannonball had taken his leg off at the hip, and they had amputated it up there. It's the type of wound during this war that 97% of the people die from. When they send Hood from the hospital, they send his leg with him because they thought they're going to bury you pretty soon, so your leg might as well be there to bury you altogether. So there has been a lot of speculation that he was under the influence of laudanum, which is an opiate for a painkiller. He did have to be strapped to his horse and able to ride because he didn't have that extra leg there. There's not a lot of hard evidence for it, but chances are he was probably taking something just from the pain of active campaigning with what basically amounts to a stump over here. One of the main things is during that debacle at Spring Hill where the Union Army marches right past, Hood had gone to bed really early. So a lot of the soldiers sort of carried on this narrative that he had been drunk that night and passed out and wasn't there to give orders. Chances are he probably was on some sort of medication. Don't know really how much it would have affected his ability to command here. One of the things here is he's kind of aggravated with his army because they didn't attack at Spring Hill. So he wants them to sort of experience attacking entrenchments. He thinks that they won't do that anymore. So that's part of the reason why he launches them against those breastworks and stuff. I think it's about time for us to wrap up here. If you've got any others.
Any other questions? All right.
Could you explain a little bit about the Spencer rifle? Was there any predecessor to that? How did you load it?
Well, okay.
Richard, repeat that for me.
Rob was just asking there about the Henry rifle here. This thing was patented in 1860, so when the war breaks out, it really is a new invention. You did have some other lever action repeating rifles like the Spencer. That one dropped down. But this one is, of course, and you can see from the body style, it's a Winchester rifle, basically. It's a 16 shot, and you loaded it through the barrel. So there's a tube under the barrel where all of your bullets go. And basically up here towards the front, it just sort of cracks to the side, and you load the bullets in there. So it's a fast loading gun. Of course, when you fire that lever, kicks out the shell there. I think there was about 1,700 of these things ordered by the Union troops during the war. So not a lot of them were issued, like government issued. But like I said, these troops would buy these things because it was such a superior firearm. You don't see a lot of them in the East, but there are regiments out here in the West that are going to arm entire regiments with them. Now, of course, the drawback is it is an encased cartridge. It's a brass cartridge, so the ammunition is expensive. But a lot of these regiments will pony up every month and put basically into a hat for ammo. So they had plenty of ammo there at Franklin for their Henrys, and that's why there was such a huge volume of fire that came out of those works there. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
Was there a different way that the Southern armies looked at their generals and the Northern armies looked at their generals? Because it appears in many battles the Northern commanders had more latitude to react to what was going on in the battle. Is there any evidence of that?
I don't know that there's any hard evidence of it. Part of the thing with the Confederate and the Southern mentality is that leading by front, leading from the front. He was asking if there's a difference between command in the Union and Confederate armies, with Union officers having more leeway to do things. What you had here at Franklin is the main Union commander, Schofield, spends most of his time worried about that bridge and getting his army to escape. So a lot of his subordinate commanders sort of take it on themselves when the actual fighting begins. But, we talk about Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant. Once these battles are joined and the smoke is there obscuring the field and you can't see anything, all Civil War battles degenerate to basically the level of regimental command or maybe brigade. Brigade is a collection of 4 or 5 regiments. But once you're in that chaos and smoke and everything, that's about all you can control. So the brigade becomes really this compact, like hitting force, because the one general, the brigadier general in command of that brigade, can actually control that. So the main generals are going to be sort of, if you think like a chess match, they're going to sort of set the board. But once the bullets start flying, it's your more subordinate commanders that are going to direct the battle to either defeat or victory. Because those main guys they just can't see that far. And, you know, you could change the whole Civil War with walkie-talkies or something, but communication on the battlefield is hard. If you want to send a message to a guy that's a mile away, you got to have a staff officer write that message. You got to sign it. That guy's getting on a horse. He's got to ride that mile. He's got to find that guy, which is not always an easy task either. Then deliver. So you're looking at least a 20-minute delay on something like that, just getting word about a mile down the line there. So here at Franklin, a lot of your federal commanders took it upon themselves. They're there on the ground. They know the spots that need to be plugged and the areas that are going to be, the most threatened. Now, one of the other problems here with the Confederate Army is you just don't have a lot of that top-down leadership. Hood does have his faults, and he's kind of mad at the Army. And once they step off from Winstead Hill there, he doesn't really have too much to do with directing that battle. It's going to be either the corps commanders, or you get down to division like Claiborne, or these brigade commanders like Otho Strong. But so many of those guys are killed that it takes away that Confederate command structure. A lot of those regiments are wandering around out there, and the lieutenant takes over, and he doesn't really know what he's doing because he's so far down the line. So it's just a confusing aspect for the Confederate command there. Anything else? All right, I want to say thank you for guys for coming and listening. We do this every month, so please come back and visit us again. It's a different topic every time, but thanks for coming.
Thank you, Richard. Just a quick announcement. Next month, we'll be taking it back to Christmas Past. We're going to be looking at our collection from Christmases Past. It's called Unwrapping Christmas Past. So come back. That'll be December 8th, I think, Mary. So check on that with us. Please join us as members and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.